Okay, well, welcome back for the third part of the college boot camp through Find Your Fit. Today's session is an important one, and it's how to write the college essay, which typically is a subject that a lot of students get nervous about. So I hope that by the time we're done, you feel better about it. I will say this is a session that I wish we were in person for. I have to talk for 2 hours. I can't see your faces. I just have to look at myself. And in person, it can be a lot more fun because there's interaction. So I will do my best to stay engaged for 2 hours, and I hope you can do the same. I last night, the foundation sent out some handouts that we're going to be using today. They're worksheets. I put them in the chat in case you didn't receive them. It doesn't really matter because we're not in person if you don't use them during the webinar today. Although, as we all know, unless you do it actively during the webinar, you probably will not. But I, I hope that you will find that those resources are helpful. Okay, so some of the questions I like to ask students, first of all, do you know where you're applying? And that's why this boot camp is in the order that it was. The first one was how to create a college list. Yesterday was how to complete your common application, and then today is how to write the college essay. Because the reality is not all colleges require essays. Um, it seems like the college essay is a big topic. I don't know if you've thought about what you'd like to write about. Sometimes in AP Lang classes, uh, that's an exercise that teachers might assign as writing a college essay. Anyways, so we are going to get going. So what I will be talking about today, one is to understand the role of the college essay, why it can be important. We will be doing brainstorming exercises. That's why I sent the worksheets. I'll explain the different types and structures of essays, the mechanics of essays. I also will be using actual essay samples to show you. The one thing that I want to stress to you is the fact that what I will be showing you, these are final versions, the final drafts. These are not first drafts. And this is a process. I've been working with students for many years, and I can tell you that with all the hundreds of students and thousands of essays that I have read, especially at the beginning of the essay process, nobody writes an essay in one draft and it's done and perfect. So it takes some craft, and just be kind to yourself and know that it's not going to be perfect in the first draft. Also, if you are a parent attending this, great. I hope you get some good information out of it. The one thing I want to strongly encourage you is to not write your students' essay for them. We'll talk about the importance of voice, and it is always very obvious when a parent writes something versus a teenager. There's a very different voice that comes through. Okay, so an exercise that I like to do, and this is was sent to everybody. It's a values exercise. And what I sent out was a sheet that shows a whole bunch, I don't know, 60, 70 values. Okay. Again, I'm not going to sit here and have dead space looking at myself. But what I encourage you to do is to look through this list of values and pick the 10 that today you feel are represent you, that they're important to you. And I always stress with students, this list is always going to be changing. If we were meeting next week, you might pick different ones because you're in a different space, in a different mood. If I asked you to pick 20, you could easily do that. But I use the number 10 just as part of an exercise. And then what I would be doing is saying, okay, now that you've got your 10, look at that 10 and circle the five that are the most important to you today. And then go through that process. And then I say, okay, put a star out of those five, put a star next to the three that are the most important. And then finally, I put a little heart by the one that today is your number one value. And I'll explain in just a second why knowing your values is important. And it doesn't mean you have to write about any of those values, but values do play a role. And when I do this exercise, I did it this morning, and it's funny because I've done it in the past and it does change. But currently, today, my 10 values are gratitude, community, laughter, vulnerability, wisdom, helping others, listening, creativity, spirituality, and kindness. And if I was to pick my number one, I would say it's gratitude, which will make sense to you in a little bit. But again, it doesn't really matter. But again, when I'm going through a brainstorming exercise, what I might say is, okay, so I'm going to pretend to talk to myself here. Mary Pat, uh, helping others, is that something that you've always been someone who likes to help others, or is it something more recently as you've gone through high school? And, again, learning a little bit about the history. And again, I hear all sorts of different things, and I might say, oh no, I'm somebody who always liked helping people. It makes me feel good, blah, blah, blah. And then I might say, oh, can you give me an example of something that you did where you helped others? And I might talk about creating the Find Your Fit program and how I'm somebody who I grew up, my parents didn't go to college, so I'm what's known as a first generation. And sometimes I'm always amazed at the fact how well my life has turned out. Um, and that I have seen over the years of being a college counselor that families with money, the students tend to have some benefits that maybe students who don't know their families don't understand the process as much, or they don't have the resources to pay for college counselors or SAT tutors and all that stuff. And so this is my way of giving back to the community. Okay, so, and then I might say, okay, well, how will the value of helping others, how will it be something that you use in your future, whether it's be going to college or in a career? So again, think about think about why these values are important to you and kind of think about the history of them, and you might be surprised at the stories that start to come out because of these values. Now, you might think, well, why are you talking so much about values? So on Tuesday, when we talked about creating a college list, I showed a number of resources, and one of the resources that I really like is a website called College Data. And every college has a page on there and all sorts of information. And for every college, under the admission tab for that specific college, there is a scattergram. And I'm showing you two right here, which I'll explain in a second. And it's 20 different admission factors, and colleges have to state whether or not something is very important, considered, or not considered in the admission process. And they all look different. So the school on the left of my screen is UCLA, and the school on the right is Stanford. And you can see that for both schools, the essay is very important. Excuse me. If you look further down where it says character and personal qualities, for UCLA, it's important. For Stanford, it's very important. And oftentimes students will say to me, well, how is that measured in the college application? So just briefly reviewing the 5 possible things that we talked about yesterday that a college may ask for. One is the transcript. That's always going to be there. And this isn't to diminish what anybody's transcript looks like, no matter how strong it is. I personally don't believe that it really shows character and personal qualities. I know wonderful students who struggle. I know wonderful students who don't struggle, whatever. So I don't think it shows character and personal qualities. The same thing is true for standardized test scores. Third thing is the high school activity list. Now, yes, I do think this can represent a student's character and values a little bit more because it shows how the student spends their time. But as I mentioned yesterday, on the Common Application, students are only given 150 characters to talk about what they've done. So you can't really go in that great of detail. Then the fourth one is letters of rec. As I said yesterday, there's a lot of universities that don't accept them. The other point about letters of rec, even if a school requires them, technically you're not supposed to see them. So you don't know what teachers are writing about you. We hope that they're writing about your character and personal qualities. And again, that's one of the reasons why I encourage students to sit down and talk to teachers and maybe do let them ask you questions and things like that to learn more about your character and your personal qualities. But you don't know what they're saying, so that one's out of your control. So what does that leave? It leaves the essay. And the piece that I always want to stress to students, that essay, every essay, no matter how many essays you have, they are 100% in your control. You control every word, the word count, the subject, everything is in your control. So I strongly recommend students to make sure that whatever they're writing about, and you likely will have more than one essay that you have to write, that your values are reflected in there. Like when you're all done, you think, oh, okay. And you could ask somebody, oh, what values are you seeing? And if someone says, I don't know, I don't see any, well, then you might want to, want to change how you write it because that's the only place that you can control that. So we talked about that. Okay. So here's the deal about essays. Again, I believe in the balanced college list. And if you are a strong student, again, you've got strong grades, lots of rigor, solid, strong, standardized test scores, and hopefully you're applying to a wide variety of schools, not just what I call the reach and extreme reach. You've got some match schools, some maybe schools. If you're super strong, colleges are mostly going to focus on the academic part, and you will likely be admitted if you're strong and it's a higher acceptance rate, like 50% or higher. But it's as you go down the food chain and more select, and colleges become more selective, and everybody's data points look similar to yours or better, that is when the essay will take on greater importance. So a couple things I always want students to remember. First of all, remember that colleges are businesses, they're not charities, and they're in the business of making money. Um, and colleges, they always have institutional priorities, which means the things that are important to them when they're creating a class, and they don't necessarily share that with anybody. So sometimes, it's usually not the student, it's just the fact that there's too many students, qualified students applying. One of the things you'll hear me say repeatedly today is keep in mind you don't know who is reading your college application. And I don't say that to scare you at all. It's just a fact. You don't know what time of day it's being read. You don't know what happened to the person who read it the day before, what kind of a mood that they're in. Like, you don't know anything. So it's out of your control. And college applications are read very, very quickly. If you started working on your Common Application, as I said, just the data section alone can be 1 to 2 hours. If you've started working on essays, you know that it takes time. If you got to ask for letters, like there is a lot of time involved with successfully completing college applications. And again, colleges, they have to get through these. So at the University of Michigan, or University of Michigan, University of Washington, uh, the readers have something like between 6 and 8 minutes total to read the entire application. And that's a lot. And other schools are similar. Some schools give them 5 minutes to read. Like they have to get through a certain amount of applications. So, which is why I always say to students, make sure your application is authentic, it represents you, have a balanced list, and trust the process because it does work. And this is a subjective process. And and for some students, applying to college might be the first time that you don't get what you what you applied for. A lot, again, I've worked with a lot of high achieving students, and the college process can seem unfair and not transparent, and that's the fact. So, all right. So there's a number of great universities that do not require essays. Washington State, Arizona State, Clemson, University of Utah. There's San Diego State, Cal Poly. But just know that many colleges do require the essay. And what is the role of the college essay? I think it's three things. So when so when they get your application, The essay is the very last thing. It's at the very back. And when they're all done reading it, what I tell students is you just want them to feel great about you. Like, wow, this kid sounds wonderful, great fit. We want them on our campus. So leave a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's to showcase your character and your personal qualities. And then your goal is to tell a story that you are the only person in the world who can tell that story. And I know that that intimidates students. And again, I hope that by the time we're done, hopefully maybe in 10 minutes, when I share a story, you get a sense that it's very doable. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very, very doable. And everybody has stories that only they can tell. Now, you want your essay to be read, and I think everybody rolls their eyes at me and says, well, duh, Mary Pat. But what I mean by being read, that means it needs to be readable. And as somebody who reads essays, and I'm on the scholarship committee for the district PTSA, and like I said, I've read a lot of essays in my time, and I can tell you that not all of them are readable. When I start reading, I think, what? Like this doesn't make any, can't make any sense. Now, my job is to read essays, so I have to read them. I have to get through them. I have to piece all the things together and figure things out. But if I'm an admission reader and I only have been allotted 6 or 7 minutes to read an entire application, if I read the first paragraph of an essay and can't make heads or tails of it, I might try that paragraph one more time, but I just don't have the luxury of being able to spend a lot of time on it. Now, if if I'm reading the application of a highly accomplished student and I am a not as selective college, I might think, well, look at the academics though. They're super strong. We'll teach this kid how to write, hopefully in college. That's great. But if I'm applying to more selective schools, and I said highly selective means too many qualified students applying for too few spots, and I've got to get rid of qualified students, I think the unreadable essay would be where I started. So you want to make sure that it's readable and it's readable quickly, right? Now, you have to be the center of the universe in all of your essays because you are the person who is applying to college. This doesn't mean you can't have other people in your essay, but it can't be about anybody but you. Now, there are four basic storylines that college essays tend to fall under, and I'm going to go through each of them and give you examples. So, all right. So, in A, the first one, a student has had a challenge of some sort, and this challenge leads the student to whatever it is that they're interested in studying. And the example I like to give is I was born with a genetic eye condition. It's called nystagmus. And what it is I was born without lenses in my eyes, and these lenses are how we see. So when I was born, the doctors thought I was blind. I am not blind, but I will attest to the fact that of my five senses, sight is the weakest of mine. To compensate for not having these lenses, my eyes have to move. If my eyes don't move, I can't see. So growing up, I was made fun of a lot by kids. They'd call me wiggly eyes and stuff. And in my day, when you did driver's training, you did it through the high school, your high school in the summertime. And on the very last day of driver's ed, we would all gather in the lunchroom and we sat and took the written test. And then we lined up for the vision test. And if you've taken the vision test, you know, but you stand up and there's a little box that you put your eyes up, your head up against, and you have to read a wall chart within the box. Well, I discovered in front of all my peers that my eyes can't move in that little box. And so I remember failing the vision test and being embarrassed in front of all my peers and stuff. A number of years later, I was at a doctor's appointment and somehow my nystagmus came up in conversation. And I said to the doctor, well, it's always been confusing to me because when I look in the mirror, my eyes don't move. And I don't know why I never knew why people were making fun of me and all this stuff. And he was interested in that. And he said, let's look in the mirror together. And we did. And he said, are your eyes moving? I'm like, no. And he goes, no, but they are. But my brain tells me that they're not. So I could share that story to a college and say, and that's why I want to study neuroscience because I want to understand the connection between the brain and the body. So I had some sort of a challenge and it led me. Another one that I've read about, students who might have had dealt with some mental health issues. They got help through working with a psychologist or psychiatrist. And then that's why they want to go into the similar field so that they can also help somebody. So that's A, had some sort of a challenge, and it leads you to what you want to study. Now in B, a student knows what they want to study, but it has nothing to do with the challenge. So um, let's pretend I want to be an engineer. Um, so there's different ways that you can approach this one. One is to think about what are characteristics of somebody who would be a great engineer, and it could be I'm a good problem solver. I like to collaborate with others, and I really like math or something like that. And what I would do then is give an example where I demonstrated a strong ability to collaborate with others, where I can't remember what I said for the second one. Problem solving, I think I said, where I problem solve. Doesn't have to be with engineering, but just an area where I demonstrated strong problem solving skills. And then my something that demonstrated my love and affinity for math and the fact that I'm good at it. Or another thing to do would be, what things have I done? Maybe I've been in robotics. Maybe it was my physics class. Maybe it was uh, building a car with my grandpa or something like that. But the things that I have done that let me know that engineering is what I want to do. So this one, student knows what they want to study and they focus on those things. Now C, a student has had a challenge. This challenge has nothing to do with what they want to study, but they want to make sure that a college is aware of the challenge. And years ago, I worked with a student who she had given me the first draft of her personal statement, and it was all about how when she was in ninth grade, her mom was diagnosed with pretty serious cancer. Her mom was alive and lived and all that, which is great. But her draft was all about how much she loved her mom, how much she admired her mom, how strong her mom was, which is all great from a human standpoint, but from a college perspective, it's not because her mom wasn't applying to college. So I said to her, tell me how your mom's diagnosis impacted you. What happened to you when your mom was diagnosed with cancer? And she thought about it, and there were three things that she brought up. And the first two aren't very critical, but I'll mention them. It was the third one, though, that was. So, first thing was she had to make dinner every single night for her family. And she'd never done that before. The second thing was she was very involved in sports. She played softball, she played basketball, she played at her high school, she played at the club level. And any of you who've done sports knows that there's tons of practices and tournaments and games and all that kind of stuff, strength and conditioning. And so her mom, because again, she's in ninth grade, her mom always took her, would be in the stands or in the parking lot waiting to pick her up. And her mom wasn't able to do that because she was fighting for her life and her dad was with her mom. So, and she can't drive because she's only in ninth grade. And she was quite shy. So she had to learn to either ask for help from other families or to learn to ride public transportation. But the biggest thing that happened to her was that her mom had micromanaged her, which is uncommon in ninth grade. Her mom would go on to Skyward and go, "Oh, I see that you have a project due. Let's go to Target and we'll get your supplies. Oh, I see you have a test. I will quiz you tonight. Oh, I see there's a paper due. Give it to me so I can edit for it." And so the girl did whatever her mom asked her to do, but when her mom got sick, she did not know how to manage her own time. And her grades just went down the toilet. Now, she turned it around 10th grade and 11th grade, but that one semester from ninth grade really negatively impacted her overall cumulative GPA. And she didn't want colleges looking at that number without understanding the story behind it. So that was a really good use of talking about a challenge. And then the final one has nothing to do with a challenge, has nothing to do with what a student wants to study. It's simply a story that a student wants to share. So I am going to share a story with you that is my story. So before I start sharing the story with you, I want to remind you what I said earlier, which was keep in mind you don't know who is reading your college application and or essay. And the other thing, which I haven't said yet, but I'll say in a few slides, is Always remember that the person reading your essay knows absolutely nothing about you. So when you're telling a story, you have to set up the story so that it makes sense to the reader. So when I start this, and if you think, what in heaven's name is Mary Pat talking about? I hope you understand that I am setting up my story. So I was raised Catholic, and in the Catholic Church, Easter is the biggest religious holiday of the year. It is the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. And there is a 50-day period prior to Easter called Lent. And during Lent, people are supposed to do things to improve or to become worthy of celebrating Easter. And so you might hear of people giving up chocolate or coffee or things like that. And quite frankly, I never did anything for Lent. I don't like giving things up. However, about 14, 15 years ago, I decided that I was going to keep a gratitude journal for Lent. And the reason that I did was at the time, everywhere I looked, I kept hearing about the research that they had done on gratitude and how an attitude of gratitude would change your brain waves and do all this miraculous stuff. And it wasn't that I was negative or depressed. I've always considered myself a fairly positive person. I was just really intrigued by it. And I thought, I wonder if keeping a gratitude journal would do anything for me. So I thought, well, Lent's coming. I never do anything. I'll do this. So I was getting all set to do it. And as I'm literally getting ready to start the first of the 50 days, because I thought to myself, okay, there's 50 days. I'll write 10 things a day. And then when I'm done, I'll have 500 items in my gratitude journal. And as I was literally getting ready to start, I thought, I am not the kind of person who, as a grateful thought flits through my brain, that I can pull out a notebook from my back pocket and jot it down, or pull out my phone and put it in the note section. I would lose my phone, I would lose the notebook, which meant I was going to have to do it at the end of the day before I went to bed. And I also knew that at the end of the day, I'm usually pretty tired. Sometimes I'm crabby. And I realized that what was likely to happen is that I would have the world's most repetitive gratitude journal, that every day I would say, I'm grateful for my husband and my kids and my dogs and my house and my health and food on the table and blah, 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 blah. And I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to try to embrace this whole gratitude thing. So I challenged myself to write 10 different things every single day, no repeats, so that when Lent was over, I would have 500 items, separate items. And that's what I did. And it wasn't super hard, but there were two things that I had to do and change in order to make sure that this would happen. And the first was I had to raise my awareness of what I was grateful for because, quite frankly, like many of us, I took a lot of things for granted. The other thing was I have a lousy memory, and I had to figure out a way that if something happened to me at 8 a.m. in the morning, that I was going to be able to remember to write it down at 10:30 at night when I went to bed. And I didn't understand it at the time, but what I was doing was practicing mindfulness. So uh, if I, some of you may know, I love dogs. I have a picture in my office here of a couple of my dogs. So if I wanted to think, okay, I'm grateful for my dogs, it's like I would stop and for 10 or 15 seconds, I would just focus on the thing, whatever it was, my dogs. Okay, I'm grateful for my dogs. They give me unconditional love. They force me to get out every day and exercise. I have met some of my best friends through my dogs, that type of thing. And so when later in the nighttime, when I'm trying desperately to think of things I'm grateful for, and I'm thinking, what am I grateful for? A picture of the dogs would pop into my head and be like, oh yeah, that's right, the dogs, and I write it down. So that's what I did. Nothing miraculous happened. Could be my backup camera prevents me from hitting something. I have a good hair day. My husband says, let's get takeout and I don't have to cook dinner, whatever, things like that. So Lent is over. I have my 500 items and I was reflecting on it. And I was very surprised because, as I said, I had considered myself to be pretty positive, but doing this exercise changed me. I was happier. And I also felt like my energy had changed, that it was at a higher frequency and that people liked being around me more, were attracted to me, whatever. And I thought to myself, well, I like what this is doing, so I don't want to stop. So I didn't. So as of last night, I think I'm at 48,172 or something like that. It is as much of a part of me as taking out my contacts and brushing my teeth before I go to bed. People always say, do you write 10? Most of the time it's probably more than 10. Do I repeat? Yeah, probably a third of the time, but I'm always looking for new things to be grateful for. So I could tell this story to a college, and I would conclude it by saying something like, when I go off to college, I look forward to finding new things to be grateful for. And in today's world of hate and negativity, there are colleges that are going to say, "Oh man, we'd love to have a student like that. Come on, we admit you." But there's other colleges that are going to say, "Yeah, we love that you're positive, but that story shows us some other things about you. You're very goal oriented. When you put your mind to something, you follow through. So just know that your story can be more than just the facts of the story. It can demonstrate more." But when I talked about telling a story that I'm the only person in the world who can tell it, I can say that with great confidence. Now, Netflix is never going to make a series out of it, but I can tell you that nobody else can tell that story. I hope some of you have a gratitude story because I think gratitude is very powerful and it's an amazing thing, but you don't have my story. And that's what I mean. It's in the details. It's not the details of the blonde lady with curly hair. It's in the thought process and what happened and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, so those are the four types, the four standard personal statement types that go through. Now, there are two structures of two essays, and you've probably learned about these in any English class that you've had. The first is the narrative, which is very straightforward, cause and effect. One moment leads to the next. The story I just told, the gratitude story, that is a narrative. The key, though, is that if you write a narrative, the you at the beginning of the essay has to have changed by the end, hopefully for the better. But you have to have changed. If you haven't changed, it is not a narrative. Now, another useful structure for a college essay is the montage, which is it has a theme and everything is condensed. So remember when one of the theme or one of the whatever types of essays, storylines, whatever, and I talked about how I wanted to become an engineer, the things that I've done that make me know I want to be an engineer. That would be a montage where I would spend a paragraph on each thing that has led me to knowing that I want to be a montage. And it can be a really useful structure in an essay. All right, so let's get into the mechanics of writing a college essay. So if we were in person, I would say, if you like to read, raise your hand. And I always hope everybody does. Not everyone does, but I love to read. I particularly like to read fiction. It's a nice escape for me. And when I read fiction and I'm reading a story and there's dialogue in a book, I hear voices. Like every character has a voice in my head. And the same thing happens in college essays. When I'm reading essays, I hear the voice of students, especially if I've been working with them. I hope I do. And again, it doesn't mean it always, but that's what the goal is. I want to be able to hear a student's voice when I read it. And I am constantly, you know, attending college admission talks and listening to podcasts and going to conferences and all this different stuff. And I'm always fascinated with the college essay because I love the college essay. And admissions officers always say, what are they looking for? And it's we want to hear a student's voice, which is why I always tell students writing the college essay is very different than any type of writing that you've done in high school. It is not like AP Lang, it is not creative writing, it is conversational storytelling because they want to hear your voice. And so, one of the ways, especially for the first draft, I think this can be an effective way to get it on paper. Once you think about your story and, you know, organize it, maybe make some outline. Okay, if I'm telling a story, what are the important parts? And, maybe make an outline and maybe, pretend like it's a speech or something like that. I love telling stories to my friends, especially when something new happens. And sometimes I practice how I want to tell it so that it comes out properly. Anyway, once you figure out your story, you're like, okay, and then you practice, okay, if I was telling this story to somebody who doesn't know me, remember, they don't know anything about you, how would I tell this story? And once you've, practiced it a few times, if you go on to either Google Docs or Word, both have a dictate or microphone function, very sophisticated software, and just tell your story. Just turn it on and talk your story. Now, you're going to feel self-conscious. You're probably going to laugh at yourself or repeat yourself and say, oh, I didn't mean to do that, whatever. But you can edit all of that out. But if you do that, you will get a good idea of how you speak and have it on paper, and then you can, start massaging it and polishing it up a little bit. Obviously, it still has to have proper grammar and, all that type of stuff, but you want to write it as if you're talking to somebody. If you don't want to do it in that method, again, just keep asking yourself, okay, if I was talking to somebody, if I was telling somebody this story, how would I say it? And then it's a different structure. And make sure that you are the center of the universe of that essay. You write it in first person, and this is critical with every single essay that you write. When a college reads that essay, that they have learned something about you that they would not have found out anyplace else in your application. It should be like, I don't mean like a surprise, but it should be like, oh, wow, never would have known that about that student, type thing. They should be learning something about you that they would not have known otherwise. That's very critical. And these five basic things that I just talked about apply to every single essay that you write, okay? So the first essay where I always have students start is with the personal statement. The personal statement has multiple names. Sometimes it's called the college essay. Sometimes it's called the Common App essay. My terminology is personal statement, and this is the first one to write. The word count is 650 words, which is basically one sheet of paper. It's not that long. And I always refer to it as a generic college essay. And the reason is, remember yesterday when I talked about the Common Application, I said it's a platform, okay? And the information that's put in there is sent out to all the colleges on your list that use the Common Application. I will be explaining why you need to tie your story into college somehow in the conclusion. But when you do that, it's a generic college versus a specific college, like at Purdue or at Michigan. No, no, it is in college. Okay, so that's why it's generic. Now, I'm going to be showing you the prompts if you haven't looked at them already. And sometimes students will fixate on the prompt. The prompt isn't important for the personal statement. The prompts are great, but they're not important. What is important is your story. And so I always tell students, figure out the story that you want to share, the story you want to tell. And then when you're done, you can figure out, okay, which of these 7 prompts does it best fit? The prompts are very, very generic. Just this morning, I had one of my students reached out and said, she's done with her personal statement. She said, I'm thinking it's this prompt. And I said, yeah, that prompt will work. But then I gave her 3 others that it could also work for because they tend to be pretty generic. And sometimes students might need more than one, and I will explain that in a little bit, but that's where you want to start. So same slide as I showed you yesterday. There's different application platforms. There's the Common App. University of California system has its own application, and there's also Cal State. The good news for you, if you're applying to Cal State schools, no essays. They do not have any essays at all. So most students are used to, being in class in high school, and the teacher says, class, I want you to write a 4-page double-spaced paper on blah. Okay. And most students say, oh my God, how am I going to write 4 pages on this? I have 2 children, 2 adult children, and my younger child, my son, when he was in high school, he used to ask me to edit his papers, and I'm always upfront in saying I never enjoyed reading his papers. Writing was not his strong suit. Anyways, what he would do is he would take his time to get to the point. He would have lots of description. He would ramble. And then right around the bottom of page 2, I could tell he was panicking because he had said everything he could possibly say on the subject. And so what he would do is he would repeat himself. Now he'd rearrange the words, but he would say the same points over and over until he finally got to page 4. And when I tell this to students in my office, I often get the nod, that is exactly what I do. And again, I don't care. I'm not reading your papers. But I want to point out a couple of things. So remember I talked about the unreadable essay? which, you know, if it's a more selective school, that can be a reason that they uh, don't continue with your application. So be careful about that. Remember, it's not a school paper. Last year, I had a student literally write an essay. It was on the financial markets of 2008. And I said, I don't even think you were born then, I think, or you were 1 year old. Um, be careful about the description. We're going to talk a little bit more about creative writing versus conversational storytelling. So if you were in person with me, I would most likely point out the window, and there's usually a tree out the window, and I'd say, "Hey, describe that tree to me." And you might say, "Oh, it's a tall tree. It's got moss growing on it. The leaves are pretty." You just say stuff like that. You wouldn't say the majestic trunk of the tree reached out up to the cerulean blue sky as the birds swirled. So if you're thinking to yourself, wow, I'm really over the word count and I don't know what to do, check to see how many adjectives that you have. When we talk, we don't use a lot of adjectives. We talk very simplistically. So just be careful of that. So I don't know if you can see, but my arms are sticking out like a balance here. So there's two types of statements, and both are fine, but one's more important than the other. So one is a tell statement. A tell statement, oh, I like dogs. I like to help people. I'm a good leader. I like to eat chocolate. My family is important to me. Whatever. You're telling something. The problem with just telling is it's what I call surface level. It doesn't really go anywhere. And if I'm another student, I could say, well, I'm a good leader. I like dogs. I like to help people. I like, blah blah blah. Like we can all say whatever we want to say. So when you tell something to a college, whether it is I'm a problem solver, I like to help, whatever it is you want them to know about you, make sure you balance it out with what I call the show statement. This is the proof. So going back to my gratitude story, if I said, "Oh, I practice the art of gratitude," and somebody says, "Well, I practice it too." So, okay. So then I would tell my story, and then I'd say, how do you practice it? Why do you practice it? And then I would hear their story. I guarantee you the shows are going to be different. And it's in the shows that are going to help make it a story that only you can tell. So just remember, if you tell something to a college, back it up with the show. It's really important. And then going back to the whole premise of conversational storytelling, you are writing as if you are talking to somebody. So if I'm walking with a friend and I'm telling them a story about something my boss said to me or something, if I had a boss, um, if I, uh, let's say I was working at McDonald's and my boss was mad at me because I was coming in late for work, I wouldn't say in quotation marks, my boss said that if I keep coming in late, I will get fired. Okay. I wouldn't do that if I'm talking conversationally. I would just say, oh, yeah, my boss told me that I had better start coming in on time or I'm going to lose my job or, whatever. So there, 99.9% of the time, there should never be dialogue in the sense of direct quotations. You can talk about people saying things to you, but just paraphrase it. There is something very awkward in a one-page essay. I've seen so many times where students start off with quotes, and it doesn't work in a conversational storytelling piece. Just paraphrase. No direct dialogue. Now, another important thing that should be added to essays, all essays, I think, is the ingredient of vulnerability. And this is one that makes a lot of students very uncomfortable. And again, I'm just going to hope that you listen to me on this. So, all vulnerability means is that admitting that you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We all know I started my webinar with nobody here the other day. um, nobody's perfect, and it's the human. We're all human. And again, in essays, oftentimes I see that students feel like they need to show that they are perfect and that everything that they do is linear. Well, I do this, 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 I do this. Well, I can tell you as an old lady, life does not work that way. Life is not linear. It's more like this. And keeping in mind that your applications and essays are being read by human beings, and the human in me responds to the human in you. And so the students who I see be the most successful in this process are the ones who include some vulnerability. Now, I am not talking about ooey gooey details. I'm not talking about TMI. We still, what did I say? When they're done reading your application, I want them to have the warm, fuzzy feelings about you and feel great about you. Okay, so you still have to leave on a positive note, but don't gloss over things. It's kind of showing what you actually went through. I'm going to show you an example in a minute, but I remember years ago I worked with this wonderful student, very, very highly accomplished. He was on the Today Show for what he was doing. He was listed as a top 30 under 30 in Seattle, like one of those, like everything looked effortless. But as I was talking to him, I said, did you have any problem? And he started telling me, oh, yeah, the first time I tried this, it was a bomb and I cried. And I was like, well, what did you do? And then he said, I went to my mentor and then we had to rework. And I was like, well, you need to tell that part because otherwise you're making it sound like it was effortless. And I know that's not how life actually goes. So, anyways, I'm going to read to you an example here. And just to give you some background, uh, these are from the same student, but they're different versions of the same story. So, a student that I worked with, uh, when they started high school, it was right after the remote part of COVID. And I think they had moved to the area like a year or so before, so they didn't have a whole lot of friends. And then when school started, it seemed like everybody knew everybody and he didn't know anybody. And so he had played chess with his grandfather and father, growing up. And he thought, oh, that this would be a good way maybe to make some friends. So they joined the chess club at their high school, and it was a successful way to make friends. So that's just to give you the setup here on the story. So the first version I'm going to read, this is what the student kept using as a version. And well, you'll understand more in a second. All right, this is why I wanted to connect with more chess lovers. In sophomore year, when the local elementary school wanted to start a chess club, I jumped at the opportunity to lead one. Coaching a group of 50 kindergarten through fifth grade students, I noticed relationships being formed regardless of the difference in age or background. Through chess, I had found a way to connect my community. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not like I read it, oh, what a horrible person. But it's what I said before, surface level. It doesn't really show me a whole lot, like, okay, they like chess, maybe. So I kept poking and poking and poking and poking. And finally, I got this version. Um, I jumped at the opportunity to lead a chess club at my local elementary school. However, coaching 50 elementary students was overwhelming. At the first meeting, I stood awkwardly at the front of class, unsuccessfully clapping for attention. I felt my confidence disappear. Can't you all picture this poor kid doing this and 50 rambunctious middle or elementary school kids? Yet the first lessons taught me that everyone engages and learns differently, so I adjusted accordingly. Since the class was energetic, they wanted shorter lessons and longer playtimes. For younger students, losing against them filled them with joy. For older students, puzzles and challenges were the source of motivation. By changing my approach, the student sought competition and connection. Through chess, I had found a way to connect my community. That version is 1,000% better because the student was being authentic and real, showed some vulnerability, but it also showed, like, wow, they're flexible, good critical thinking. They could have gone the first time clapping their hands and then said, forget it, I'm not coming back and quit, but they didn't. And then they were able to successfully do it. So that shows a lot more to a college. And that's where the vulnerability becomes so powerful. So that's what I mean by vulnerability. And as I said earlier, it's the details that make it a story that only you can tell, and how that student described it and how they figured out how to fix it. So, all right, these are the 7 prompts. I am not going to read them to you. They are do a Google search, Common App prompts for 25, 26. Go to the Common App, whatever. You will see them all. They're great prompts. And if you're totally have no idea, um, maybe what I would do is before I went to bed or before I went to go do something else, I might read them, plant them in my head, and say, give me some inspiration as to what I should write about. And you might be surprised. Sometimes I encourage students just like go around your bedroom or your house, pick up pictures or things, and you might be surprised at the stories that come up. Another thing that you could do if you do that values exercise, which I hope you do, is, maybe around the dinner table, you could ask your family, hey, I did this values exercise and, these are some of the values that came up. Can you think any times when I demonstrated these values? And you might be surprised at the stories that come up. So, all right. So before you start your personal statement, which is again where I encourage you to start, do not let anyone, including me, tell you what your essay should be about. Um, just don't. You can take suggestions, but at the end of the day, this is your essay. And again, any parents on here, do not tell your child what they have to write their essays about. It will not come off very authentically. And it should be something that the student wants to write about. And for the first draft, even the second draft, whatever, don't worry about word count. At the first part, I would just tell the story, almost like you open up your brain and put all the words on. You just tell the story, and then you can go through and start editing it. I don't think any topic is off limits, but you have to keep in mind you don't know who's reading your essay or your application. So you do need to be careful. You don't want to be write something that is, could trigger something for anybody. And I say this every year, but it's especially true this year. I would not write about political anything. I just would stay away from anything that has to do with politics. So, and as I said earlier, remember, you don't know who's reading it. And the person reading it knows nothing about you. And sometimes students get really agitated at me when I say that. They're like, what are you talking about? I got my transcript, I got my activity list, blah, 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 blah. So the people who are reading the applications, they read them fast and they go through a lot. Like by the time the application season is over, they might have read 3,000 applications. Okay. And no one should think that any part of their transcript, a test score, an activity, whatever, none of it is going to stick in their brain. What typically happens is they have a rubric of some sort, they're reading the application, they're scoring, and then they're moving on. And I'm not saying essays aren't memorable, I think they are. But the other parts, they just can't remember it. So if something is important to your story, don't assume they're going to know it because of something else. And the example I give of this was, gosh, a long time ago. When I was first starting out as a college counselor, I worked with a wonderful young man who was applying to Wharton School of Business through the University of Pennsylvania. Very selective program. And they have an essay that reads, tell us why you want to go to Wharton. And I'm reading his draft, and it was all about the beautiful flowers in the campus and the park benches and the blah, blah, blah. And I said to him, wow, you are an entrepreneur. You started a business when you're in ninth grade. Why aren't you mentioning that? And his response was, oh, it's on my activity list. And I looked at him and I said, well, just so you know, some colleges, and UPenn is certainly one of them, they separate the essay from the rest of the application. They have 2 different people read it. So the person reading the essay doesn't have access to the other information. And even if they did, they're still not going to remember it. So just make sure if something is important, don't assume they're going to know it from a different part of your application. Now, when I'm reviewing essays, typically the 2 areas that need the most work are the opening paragraph and the concluding paragraph. And I'm going to explain both of them. So the first paragraph is actually really important. And it's because it sets up the story. It is the foundation of your essay. And keeping in mind that you're telling a story to somebody who knows absolutely nothing about you. So it I always say it's similar to a newspaper article where it's got the who, what, where, when, and why. Like you have to set it up. Otherwise, it just doesn't make any sense. And I know often in English classes, teachers will ask students to put in a hook. As I said, I'm going to be showing you some. Sometimes a hook happens naturally, but most of the stories, most of the essays that I read, they don't really have a hook or a forced hook. Forced hooks almost never work. So don't worry about the hook. You need to make it interesting, obviously, so that they want to read the second paragraph. But don't worry about like some sort of a big explosion of some sort to attract the reader in. But it just sets up the story for somebody who doesn't know anything about you. And then the conclusion is the other area that students seem to have problems with. And typically what happens is students forget to have a conclusion. They just kind of stop the story. And the conclusion needs to tie into college or beyond. And it makes sense that it has to if you think about it. So, first of all, you're applying to college. The college requires an essay. You're writing an essay in the hopes that you get admitted to college. So, something about that story must tie in, because otherwise, why are you having them read it? Like, if there's nothing, like, again, you get to control this. So, there has to be something that ties in. So, going back to my gratitude story, it had nothing to do with college. But if you remember, how did I conclude it? I said, when I go off to college, I look forward to finding new things to be grateful for. So it's not hard to do it all. But again, you just have to think, okay, well, what is it that I want a college to know about me, and then tie that in. So I'm going to read to you here two examples of opening paragraphs and concluding paragraphs. Obviously, in between both paragraphs, there's a lot more of the story, but hopefully you get a sense of this. So, growing up, I was heavily influenced by my older brother. By sharing the music he liked, he helped me develop my music taste in elementary school. I thought I was the coolest for listening to music that was popular with older kids, and I got inspired. And there's the conclusion. While I'm not completely over my fear of judgment, and maybe never will, I have the confidence to hit the upload button regardless. By focusing on learning and enjoying the process, my self-esteem has grown significantly, and I find fulfillment in making music. I've learned to have a healthy balance between self-confidence and self-criticism. While I know I will face academic and personal challenges in college, I know I'm prepared to tackle them. And here's a very different one. When I was one, my brother was born. That was the beginning of our family navigating the many obstacles related to my brother's neurological delay of development that has impacted him mentally and physically since birth. When I was 5, my family left our motherland in Lebanon for Paris, France, so my brother could receive the care he needed in terms of therapy and school system. It wasn't easy to leave behind our extended family and friends. After a couple of years, we moved again from Paris to Seattle. The move to the United States was recommended by the medical professionals working on my brother's case. This meant I had to start all over again, leaving many friends and memories in France behind. And here's the conclusion. While I am excited for college, it is important to me that I still be involved with my brother's care and to be of help to my parents. I am looking forward to my next chapter, which is hopefully in Seattle. And this was a student who was primarily applying to colleges in the Seattle area because of his brother's situation. But both of them were very excellent essays. So I'm often asked about timelines. Sometimes students will say, am I allowed to write about something that happened before high school? Does it only have to be in the last year? Like what's the guidelines on this? So you can write about something that happened when you're 2 or 3. It doesn't really matter to me. However, I wouldn't give it a lot of words. I last year, or not last, a couple of years ago, I had a student who gave me their first draft, and 450 words of it were spent describing something that happened when they were 5. And it was part of the story, but colleges don't really care about the 5-year-old you. They care about the more recent. You have to bring it forward to whoever you are. I had a student a few years ago also who, when they came in for their essay session, they said, I'm so excited because I've known since 5th grade what I wanted to write my college essay about. And I was like, great, tell me the story. And I said, that's an excellent story. However, it ends at the end of fifth grade. So I said, you have to bring it forward. Like, how did that thing that happened to you, how has it shaped you who you are today? And so of the 650 words, I don't know, maybe 400 was about this thing that happened in fifth grade. And then the student carried it forward to who they were today. So just know you can just don't give it too many words out of the total. All right. So now I'm going to more brainstorming to do. And this is the challenges formula. Now, nobody has to write about challenges, but challenges can be a good source of topic for a college essay because if a student's able to look behind them and say, look what I have overcome and how it's changed me, whatever, it can be kind of powerful. A couple things I do caution about challenges. One, if you're still in the middle of it, I wouldn't write about it because it's not completed yet. Also, if it's a very serious one, severe mental health issues, suicide attempts, things like that, I probably wouldn't write about them. And it's because, again, your application's being read by a human being, and red flags could come up where they're worried that, maybe, this could continue when you go off to college and all that kind of stuff. But challenges can be interesting to write about. And everybody's had challenges. Some of them are super small, like I'm somebody I don't like to eat fish at all. And if I go to somebody's house and they've got a big thing of salmon on the table for dinner, it's a challenge for me. I don't want to be rude, but I also don't want to eat the salmon. So, so just know, and then there's obviously bigger ones. So I'm going to walk you through the formula, and then I'm going to share. If we were in person, I would ask you to share a challenge with me, and I'd walk you through the formula, but can't do that on Zoom, unfortunately. So I'm going to walk you through the formula. It is one of the brainstorming exercises on the worksheet that I provided. So the first step is you have to identify the challenge. And this is similar to the opening paragraph that we talked about with the who, what, where, when, and why. Like what was it? Why did it happen? How old were you? That type of thing. And what were the circumstances behind the challenge? The second piece is what was the effect of that challenge on you? And these things need to be negative effects because if they're not negative, it's not a challenge. It would be an opportunity. So for students who might have a hard time showing some vulnerability or are uncomfortable with showing vulnerability, a challenge essay might make it easier because they have to be negative things. Could be, I lost my friends, my parents were mad at me, I failed a test, I was unhealthy, I couldn't participate, I was lonely, whatever. And sometimes students want to wallow in the effects. The effects are important. I mean, you gotta share them, but they're not the most important. They're not where the power of a challenge essay falls into. So don't ruminate there. The third and fourth steps are where the magic happens. And so the third thing is, okay, this bad thing happened to you. What did you do about it? And if your response was, I held my breath and waited for it to be over, I probably wouldn't write a college essay about it because it's not that powerful of a story. But if you actually start thinking about, oh, what did I do? Oh, I did this, I did that, type thing. And then the final piece is, how did you change? How did you grow? What did you learn from this challenge? It's a pretty straightforward formula. So I'm going to share a challenge that I had when I was about your age. And quite frankly, I wouldn't write a college essay about it anyways, but it's just so you understand the type of challenges people can have. So you may have figured out by now that I was kind of awkward. I was an awkward kid, had the wiggly eyes and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but looking back, I actually changed schools quite a bit. So kindergarten through second grade, I was at the public school. Third grade to eighth grade, I went to private Catholic school. At the end of eighth grade, most of my friends were going on to private Catholic high school, but my family couldn't afford that. So I had to go back to ninth grade was junior high at a big junior high. I didn't know anybody, and so that was challenging. And then 10th grade, the entire night, we all moved up to the big public high school. And by the end of 10th grade, I was doing okay. I had friends, I was in activities, I knew how to open my locker, I had people to eat lunch with, that kind of stuff. And that summer, one day my parents came home and they said, "Oh, we've bought a new house. It's 5 blocks away." And it was in a different school district where I knew nobody. And I was devastated. I was crying. Oh my God, I hate changing schools and I don't know anybody. And I was just making friends and, blah, blah, blah. So the neighbor across the street suggested that I use their home address uh, for school so that I could stay at the same high school and I would just have to walk 5 blocks from the bus stop. And that was fine. So that's what we did. So when junior year started, I filled out the paperwork and there's no computers back in this day. It was just all handwritten forms. And I never went to the office to say, "Oh, by the way, I moved across the street," because they would have asked me to prove it or would have said liar because nobody moves across the street. So junior year goes by, it's all fine. And then I'm in my senior year and I still remember the day. It was the Tuesday of Thanksgiving week. All of a sudden, I got called down to the counselor's office, and I was very much a below the radar student. Like very awkward, very shy, very quiet. Nobody knew me. And I got called down because, just FYI, in case you ever move, when you move, your mail gets forwarded by the US Post Office for a year. And then after a year, it gets returned, and there's a big stamp that says return to sender. This family, these people have moved, and here's their new address. So the school had found out that I moved. And the reason why it was such a big deal, I grew up in the Detroit area, and the Detroit public schools were not schools people really wanted to go to. They were not in very good shape. And our school district was the first district right outside of the Detroit border. And they always had issues with kids from the Detroit school districts trying to go to the suburban public schools. And so they decided to make an example out of yours truly. And it took from Thanksgiving week to mid-January. And then finally, the school board voted that yes, I could stay and graduate with my high school class as long as my parents were willing to pay $2,000 in tuition. Now, my parents did not have $2,000 for me to go to college, let alone go to high school for 4 months. So I had to change high schools. And as you can imagine, I was not very happy about it. And so the first day I was going, and what I was mostly scared about was lunch because it was a closed campus. I couldn't like walk to McDonald's or something like that. I had to go, and I knew I'd pick the wrong table and someone would make fun of me or whatever, something bad was going to happen. So I'm going through each period. I'd be introduced as the new girl and blah blah blah. And the period right before lunch, a girl came up to me and she said, "Hey, I know you're new. Would you like to sit with my friends and I at lunch?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, please. Thank you so much." So I did. And while she and I never became good friends, I did become very good friends with the other kids at that table. And I was able to survive and I graduated and all that kind of stuff. But what did I learn from that experience? I learned a couple things. One, don't lie about your address when, when you're going to school. But the second thing I learned was the importance of community to me. I did not like the fact that I had changed schools so many times. Community is very important to me. I like to have roots. I like to know who my people are. And so I vowed that wherever I was going to go to college, I was going to stay. Third thing that I learned was that was the first time in my life that my parents couldn't solve a problem that I had. And that was kind of a big growing up lesson for me. And then the fourth piece is the fact that that young woman who came up to me and invited me to join them for lunch really made an impact on me. I actually think of her often, probably every time I tell the story, but it changed me. And I am somebody, if I know that there's somebody new or they don't know people, I go out of my way to help to be a resource and to acclimate them and maybe introduce them to other people and all that kind of stuff. So, anyways, so think about a challenge that you've had. Again, maybe just go through it, go through the exercise, and you might be surprised that you have a good story to tell for a college. All right. So at the very beginning, I said that there were colleges that do not have any essay requirements. Great. Then there are colleges that require a personal statement. And now we're going to talk about colleges that, in addition to the personal statement, they require additional essays, which are called supplemental essays. Okay. And these are specific to a college, and they can change them. And there have been some changes this year. Um, for the most part, any essays that you see should be confirmed for fall 26 by this point. I did this workshop back in June, and at that point, things were still changing a bit. So when it comes to supplemental essays, some are going to be listed as required, and some might be designated as optional. So obviously, required essays, you have to answer them. How do you do it for optional? So there are some optional essays that you very likely do not have to answer. And the common ones are you a convicted felon? Are you, are you a registered sex offender? Have you had been any disciplinary action taken against you in high school? And if you can honestly, easily say no to all those things, skip them. You don't have to do anything. But if they were to ask you, um, tell us about your favorite extracurricular activity and why it's important to you. And this is an optional essay. You should answer it. The other students will be answering it. And if you actually want to go to that college, and you should only be applying to colleges that you want to actually go to, you need to be answering it. So everything I talked about earlier, writing in first person, conversational storytelling, show and tell, show some vulnerability, blah, 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 all that stuff that I talked about, all of that applies to supplemental essays. But there's some additional information that I want to go through. So because these are specific to the college, you can and should say the name of the college in your response, okay? The word count is often, not always, but often it is shorter than the 650 word essay. Do not make the mistake of thinking, oh, that makes it easier. It's actually a little more challenging because you have to tell a complete story in 200 words, 100 words, 350 words, whatever it is, but you have to tell a complete story. At the more selective schools, supplemental essays are typically weighed heavier in the admission process because they are so much harder to write. Now here, you must answer the prompt. So, when we were talking about the personal statement, I'm like, don't worry about the prompt. Tell your story and then figure out the prompt. That matches it. Here, you must answer the prompt. So if I'm a reader and I'm reading the essays, and I already said, maybe the first batch I get rid of is the student who writes the unreadable essay. The second batch is likely going to be the student who doesn't answer the prompt. And you might think, well, why wouldn't I answer the prompt? Well, I'll tell you why. Because senior year is about to start, and you are going to be shocked at how much work all of these essays are. For most students, they have a lot of essays that they have to write, and they are not easy to write. And school starts, and the teachers dump schoolwork on you, and you still have to do well. Senior year, all that stuff we talked about. So sometimes kids will be like, close enough. Close enough does not work in supplemental essays. I'll talk about repurposing in a minute, but it is not a cut and paste type of a situation. So you must answer the prompt. Okay. However, do not waste any words repeating the prompt. So if the prompt is tell us about your favorite extracurricular activity, you would not start off with my favorite extracurricular activity is blah, blah, blah. You just jump into the story. And as I stated earlier, the college should learn something new about you in each and every essay. So um, I've been reading a lot of essays this summer. That's what I do with my students. And I've been noticing a lot of students are trying to cram so much information into their personal statements. They're like putting in 5 stories worth and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, no, no. Like you're telling a story. Don't put everything in there because if, let's say I wrote a combo essay about my personal statement is about my practice of gratitude and how important community is to me. I don't know if I want to write a supplemental essay, those 2 topics are off the table. I cannot or should not be writing an essay where any of that is repeated. So don't try to cram your whole life story into your personal statement because then you won't have things to write about. So if I was to write about my gratitude story or my gratitude journal in my personal statement, that's great. maybe then I'm going to talk about my volunteer work with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, or how I love to strength train, or whatever it is, in different essays. So colleges should learn something new about you in each and every essay that they receive. I talked about repurposing. So if I were to look back at a student who had a lot of essays, and you might say, what's a lot of essays? So again, it's going to depend on your college list. Some of you might only have to write a personal statement. Excellent. Lucky you. That's great. But if you have more selective schools on your list, you probably are going to have more essays that you have to write. And it's not uncommon for students to have 20, 30, 40 essays, depending on their college list. I don't recommend that, but that's just the way it goes. So if I were to look at us, when a student is all done with all their essays, if I were to look back and say, okay, that student wrote 27 essays, most likely there would be four, maybe five different stories that they tell, and they repurpose them. And what I mean by that is it's not a cut and paste, but they have the basic storyline done, and then they might change the opening paragraph and the concluding paragraph to reflect the college supplemental essay prompt, et cetera, et cetera. But the basic storyline is the same. That's repurposing, and I strongly encourage you to repurpose. These are some examples of supplemental essays. The ones on the left are the more traditional ones, 100 words, 200 words, 300 words. And then on the right are examples of short responses. Not that many schools do them, but Stanford does them, USC does them. I think University of Maryland does them. I'm sure there's more, but those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. And when it comes to the short responses, again, everything's still the same that I talked about. The biggest thing, though, with a short response is character count or word count versus a supplemental essay. So if a college has a supplemental essay, let's say it's a 300-word supplemental essay, and you write it, it's excellent, and it's 260 words. If I were looking at it, I wouldn't say, oh, come on, I need 40 more words. Let's get to 300. No, I'd be like, oh, great. Got 260 words. It tells a great story. You are done with that. However, if I was reading a short response and the question was, in 100 characters, tell us about your favorite food, and you think, oh, great, tacos, 5 characters. I can be done with that. I would say to you, maximize the character count on this one, because one, colleges don't really care what your favorite food is, but they are trying to learn more about you. So maybe I'd say tacos because um, they remind me of family, because my grandmother, we would have dinner once a month and she would, make tacos, or, something like that. Just know that you do not need to write in complete sentences for these short responses like that. And and don't forget to show your personality. Like, let's say I was a computer science major or something like that. Like, all my responses do not have to be computer science STEM related. If I want to show that I've got a sense of humor, or that I like to eat chocolate, I don't know, that's okay. So make sure you do that. Now, some of you might be applying to the University of California system. And their system is a little different. As I said, they have their own application. Their own activity list is a little different, that A through G grades that I talked about. And what they do not have a personal statement, and they don't have supplemental essays. They have what are known as personal insight questions. They're commonly referred to as the PIQs of the UC application. And what it is, there are 8 prompts, and you can see them here, and students need to pick 4. Each one is a maximum of 350 words. They they love, the UCs love storytelling. Okay. Love story. That's all they want is storytelling. They want that conversational storytelling. They do not want research papers or anything like that. They do like one of the responses. They don't say this, but I attend their workshops that they do each year. They do like one that is specific to choosing a major, as to what a student is interested in. They do like to hear about that. And some of them, like, describe how you've taken advantage of a significant educational opportunity, or work to overcome an educational barrier you faced. be careful, telling the story of how you struggled in a class and your parents got you a tutor. There's a lot of underserved populations applying to the University of California system. Remember, it's a California state school. There's a lot of people in that state. So sometimes stories can sound tone deaf. Same thing with what's the most significant challenge you have faced. I once had a student write about how when they were in a robotics competition, a part broke. And I said, yeah, you need to pick another prompt. So anyways, just be careful. A lot of students truly have big challenges and have overcome true barriers. So I'm not telling you not to answer those, but just be sensitive to your response. All right. University of Washington, a very popular school for many students to apply to. This is kind of weird because the University of Washington just changed their prompt. If you went to the June workshop that I did, I talked about the community essay and it has been removed. So, so I'm not going to talk about community essays because they're not on the table very much this year. So, University of Washington, this is the Seattle campus that I'm talking about. Bothell does it differently. But so I showed you the 7 prompts of the Common App, and the University of Washington started using the Common App maybe 5 years ago, I think it's been. It used to use a different application. Anyways, they use the Common application, and I showed you the 7 prompts. But UW, because it's UW, they don't use those prompts. Remember yesterday when I showed on the Common application, it showed colleges on my list that did not require the personal statement. And I said, UW's on there. And I said to be careful. And this is why, because it's within the UW application within the Common App. And this is their essay prompt. It says, tell a story from your life, describing an experience that either demonstrates your character or help to shape it. And it's 650 words, just like the Common App personal statement. So I cannot think of a single instance where a student has not been able to do this. All you do is you simply take your personal statement, the Common Application personal statement, and you cut and paste it into the University of Washington response. I don't think I've ever seen a situation where that prompt doesn't work for whatever the student wrote about. So, and I would still keep it generic, which means you don't have to say UW specifically, but you could. So then, yesterday also I talked about the additional information section that they have, which I'll show you again in a minute. But UW has it within their own UW section of the Common App. And we've gotten conflicting, we being college counselors here in town, we've gotten conflicting answers from UW. They definitely do not read the personal statement on the Common App. So if you forget, I don't think you could because I think it would tell you your application is incomplete. But if for some reason you did not cut and paste into this UW specific prompt and you only had it in the Common App bigger area of the platform, they won't read it. They don't see it. And with the additional information, again, this provides context if you've had to replace a grade, if you've had circumstances that you need to explain. I told you about the student who missed 40 days of school sophomore year. Anything, if you're doing running start, if you attend a choice school and you just want to flag it, just make sure whatever you put in the Common Application part, I would cut and paste it and put it into the UW specific one, just to be safe. And I would do that probably for any college that has, are there any circumstances that you want to explain? I would just cut and paste just to be safe, to make sure that colleges do see it. All right, so the essay I'm going to talk about next is the Why Us essay. And these tend to be asked by more selective schools, and these are very challenging. I probably wouldn't start, I probably wouldn't make these my first supplemental essays that I was writing. It's like kind of get your training wheels, get your strength up, you'll get better at writing them. But these are challenging. So here go my arms again. Just like I did with show and tell, I'm going to do it with the Why Us. So the prompt basically says, tell us why you want to study whatever your major is at our school. And so students will talk about why they want to attend that school. Now, I'll caution you, do not be generic. You should not say, You have a beautiful campus. Your whatever program is wonderful. You have study abroad, you have football, you have Greek, whatever, because that's a lot of schools, all right? You should be more specific. So this is where doing your research can be helpful, a virtual tour, seeing it in person, uh, talking to professors, whatever you can do to learn more, say it. Look in the FIS guide if there's information that appeals to you there. But the part students forget is this part, which is why should the college want you? Okay, that is very critical. So I always encourage students to do this exercise. So one, make a list of what it is you want from a college. Okay, it could be I want to study biology. I want to be able to easily do research. I want to play intramural soccer. I want to be able to eat pizza at 2 o'clock in the morning easily. I don't know, whatever, whatever it is that you're looking for. And then with each college, because remember, there's no perfect college. You're not necessarily going to get everything that you're looking for. What does the college offer to you? And then how will I engage? Like, okay, um, I see that the school values this. This is what I can bring to the college. So whenever, before you start writing a why us essay, I strongly recommend that you spend a few minutes, go to a college's website and type in the words mission statement or values or what is the school looking for in a student. You will find all sorts of different information. So MIT is very interesting. So MIT, what they're looking for, uh, they are looking for students who want to collaborate with others to make the world better. Because so MIT doesn't use the Common App, they have their own application, but they've got, I think, 5, 6, I can't remember, questions, basically supplemental questions that they ask. And one of them is why MIT? Okay, so if in your explanation you're not proving to them, again, with the show and the tell, how what you have done that demonstrates that you too want to collaborate with others to make the world a better place. Also, um, they they're looking for students who prioritize some measure of downtime. And one of their questions is, tell us what you do for fun. Okay, so they're very straightforward. The University of Michigan says we look for students doing amazing things in their communities with their religious organizations or with their families or caregivers. We're looking for students who embrace giving back, not only to campus, but to society, who have a good sense of self. Your job is to show us who you really are on that application. So again, if I was writing my response to why do you want to go here, I would make sure that I would be doing some demonstration of what I have done uh, to give back to society. Purdue, I'm not going to go through all these, but they have 6 different pillars: integrity, respect, honor, inclusion, innovation, and growth. Now, I would not expect a student to be able to address all of those. I think they only give students 250 words to explain why Purdue. Um, but I would read through those and I might say, oh, okay, um, let's see. We're a unified community that respects each other by embracing diversity, promoting inclusion, and encouraging freedom of thought and speech. Well, if that was something that was important to me, I would make sure I demonstrated what I've done that's a strong value for me too. So just pay attention. And then here's one with Northwestern. They have 8 different things. Again, you're not going to be able to address 8 pillars or points in your essay, but go through them and see what speaks to you, what is authentically you, and make sure you share that. So I'm just going to read parts of these to you. These are 2 examples of why do you want to study this major at our school? And what I want you to see when I read this stuff is that the majority of what these students successfully write is the fact that it's mostly about the student. It's not about the school so much. So this particular one was a student who was applying to the nursing program at the University of Michigan. Let's see. Let's see. I can't, my face is over this. My goal to use my time and education to serve those less fortunate. The University of Michigan offers me opportunities to continue to serve underserved communities through their student-led organizations, leads them. I dream of traveling the world and experiencing life outside of what I know. I'll minor in global health. Michigan also offers 7 study abroad programs specifically for nursing programs. As a woman in STEM, I want to attend a college that empowers me. My AP chemistry teacher encouraged me to join HOSA and Science National Honor Society, 2 male-dominant clubs. I competed for our HOSA chapter and discovered that I love the science community. Since then, I have encouraged young women in my school to join these clubs alongside with me. I like to continue my active involvement in supporting women in STEM, and then they talk specifically about the nursing program. Here's another one. This one was for Georgia Tech. And the student, and it was for business technology, I think. In elementary school, I ran my own classroom business. This early interest led me to join DECA, where I applied my informal experience in a real world setting. I participated in a marketing event in 10th grade, and while nervous, I memorized my presentation and made it to state. This led me to enrolling in IB Business Management in 11th grade, where I learned about marketing, finance, and human resources. I've always been drawn to organizing information. At 8, my fascination with numerical patterns led me to write numbers sequentially in a notebook. I moved on to making spreadsheets for everything, which evolved into a deeper interest in information management, highlighting its critical role in decision-making and business efficiency. And then they talk about what they want to do at Georgia Tech. An important lesson I learned in high school is asking for help. I'll make the most of the knowledgeable and supportive community, blah, blah, blah. But when you read these examples, it's mostly the student explain about them, because remember, that's the part the college doesn't know. How will you fit into the college? What will you contribute to the college? And you have to prove it to them. I mentioned earlier that sometimes I will recommend to a student that they might need to write an additional person, like have 2 different personal statement options. So this is the thought process that I go through for this. So first of all, I ask a student, do you know your major? Because as I mentioned yesterday and Tuesday, many colleges admit students by major and many admit freshmen directly into the major. So do you know your major? Let's assume, yes, I do. Does the college offer direct admit for freshmen? In some of the schools on your list, the answer might be yes, and some of it might be no. So let's pretend I'm a computer science major. So, and I'm applying to the University of Washington. Does the college offer direct admit for freshmen? Yes. Is there a supplemental essay about choosing a major? Now, if I'm applying to the University of Washington into computer science, I understand, or I better understand the fact that this is a highly selective program. It has like a 25% acceptance rate, which is much better than maybe at Carnegie Mellon or University of Illinois Urbana, which is like at a 5% acceptance rate. So UW looks pretty good. Anyways, I just spent a few minutes ago, I showed you UW currently has only the one essay. I forgot to mention, so UW just pulled their community essay that they had like in the last, I think Monday, like literally, it just happened this week. And we have asked the University of Washington if they're planning on replacing the community essay, because their application does not go live. Like if you were to look at it on the Common App, it's not live yet. It goes live September 1st, and they said they didn't know. So it's possible UW will have an additional essay to write to replace the previous one, but I don't know if they will. But anyways, but even so, I showed you that UW has the, shares an experience that created who you are as a person, whatever that prompt was. It doesn't say, why do you want to study this major at the university? Well, they don't have that prompt. So typically for my students that are applying to either engineering or computer science, specifically at UW, I encourage them to write a why they know computer science, or what they, how they know engineering is their path. Again, if you look at UW's website, they say you don't need to do that. All I can tell you is based on the results I have seen with students that I've worked with, that if it's done properly, it can be successful. So now, so let's say I do write a why computer science essay. Personal statement. Well, if I'm also applying to the University of Michigan, they have a supplemental essay that says, tell us why you want to study computer science at our school. I can't give them the same information. And you can say, well, but it's slightly different. Yeah, because it's the University of Michigan and I have to talk about that aspect of it. But the why computer science is still going to be the same. So for the University of Michigan, I would probably use an alternate personal statement. Maybe I tell them my gratitude journal story for that. And remember, the cool thing about the Common Application is it's a platform. And so I can send, I might have 3 schools where I use one personal statement and 7 schools where I use an alternate. You've got that flexibility. So that's why I say it's possible. Again, it depends on your major and all that stuff. But what I always tell students is tell your story. Okay. And it's the details. So this was from quite a while ago. But this was a student who was applying to the computer science program at the University of Washington, and this was part of their personal statement, um, how they studied for a computer science competition. I solved almost every problem I found from previous contests and consulted college level textbooks to learn new algorithms and techniques. I felt prepared when the online competition began in December. After 4 qualification rounds between December and March, I was named one of 26 national finalists out of thousands of students. It was fulfilling to see my hard work and passion transform into actual results. So instead of just saying I was a finalist, the student explained how they approached it and how they successfully managed it. Again, additional information, same information that I said yesterday, but remember, this just allows you to provide context about anything that they wouldn't know. You don't want them to have to guess, and they're not going to call, in most cases, your school counselor or anything like that. They're too busy. So just explain. And as I say there, remember the University of Washington has asked the same thing. The word count's different though. UW only allows 200 words. The Common App allows 300. So you might have to edit it down. As I said, do not make excuses. And as I said yesterday, they've replaced the COVID explanation with challenges and circumstances. Again, these are not essays. You don't have to worry about all the things I talked about. This is just a simple explanation. So, as I said, your goal is to tell a story that you are the only person in the world who can tell it. And I'm just going to briefly go through some of the very common stories that I see from students, especially in first drafts. And I have to say, this is a cliche. And please know, I'm not minimizing the importance of whatever happened to you, and because I know that these can be life-changing experiences. I know that. Okay. I remember being your age too. The problem is they're common. They're a cliche. It's one of those things like, start watching a movie and you can say, oh, I can always, a Hallmark. Okay, a Hallmark movie. I love a Hallmark movie. But as soon as it goes on, you go, I know who's going to get together because it's just like, I know what's going to happen here. So sometimes students just want to talk all about their academics and what they don't. Again, they can see that on your transcript. Any sports, sports are, uh, can be very tricky. Again, your goal is to tell a story that you're the only person in the world who can tell it. I can't tell you how many times I read a story about a sports injury and how challenging it is to not be able to play and then you heal and then you get back. A very similar story is I tried out, I'm in band and I tried out for a certain level and I didn't make it and I was devastated. So then I worked really hard the next year and then I made it. Again, awesome. That's great. But it's a common story. I moved and it was hard and I had to meet people all over tragedies, whether it's divorce or death or whatever. Again, certainly tragedies really impact, but be careful. Martial arts, oh my gosh, I have read so many martial arts and the dedication, and then I became an instructor and I got to share that, um, oh, I was taking a math class and it was so hard and I had to get a tutor and I actually had to go to office hours and then with the help of the, blah, 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 and then I got a good grade. And again, awesome, those are important things, but the story's told a lot. I went on a mission trip and I learned that no matter the color of our skin, we are all people. And again, that's an important lesson to learn, but it's been told, as is, I used to read I used to be a mean girl until COVID, and then I had to be alone, and then I came out a better person. I'm glad that those stories aren't being told anymore. But anyways, just you need to go beyond the typical story. You need to try to tell a story that only you can tell, and not one where they go, "Oh dear heavens, I have read this story so many times." So, all right, some do's and don'ts. You do have to pay attention to word count, grammar, and punctuation. Be careful of dialogue. Remember, if there's words in quotation marks, direct dialogue, just know if I was reading it, I'd go, and I'd make you paraphrase. Just paraphrase it. No flowery writing. Okay, I'll give you an example of that in a little bit. Be yourself. If you're funny, be funny. If you're, if you're a nerd, embrace it. Again, it's in your voice. You'd be surprised what comes through when you write in your voice. I don't know you guys. I can't see you, but I know a lot of students are super intelligent, so I'm not telling you to dumb down your vocabulary. Just don't try so hard. I've had students, this passion emanating outside of me. It's like nobody talks like that. I don't want to hear about a plethora of ideas or a harrowing situation. Just nobody talks like that. So remember, you're 17. Don't worry about the hook, okay? Just make your story interesting. You've seen things, I don't remember seeing any hooks in any of those. Get rid of unnecessary descriptive words. Again, if you're over the word count, go start looking at the adjectives. Only tell the parts that are important. And again, if you're trying to cram too much into your essay, pull it out because you can tell a better story with less than more. Be careful of complex sentences. When I'm reading an essay, I define a complex sentence as one that when I look at the document, it is 3 lines or longer. And all I do if I see that is I shorten them up into shorter sentences. And the reason why I do that is remember, we want to make this so readable for the person who's reading it because they're reading it fast, and complex sentences by their very nature are harder to read because they're complex. And also, we don't talk in complex sentences. We tend to talk in shorter sentences. Um, Make I statements, not you statements. If you see the word you should do that, blah, 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 highlight it, take it out, and make I should do this, okay? Because you're writing in first person. Read the essay aloud to you or push the button on your computer where it reads it to you. You will be shocked what you pick up through reading it. You might say, oh my gosh, I used the word complex 7 times in one paragraph and I didn't catch it because sometimes you're too close to it. But when you hear it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, or wow, that sentence doesn't make any sense at all. Read it aloud and then go through and see what values that you're showing. Remember the importance of values. Okay, so senior year is about to start. If you're doing running start, that's great because you won't have to deal with senior English. But if you are, just a couple things. Some English teachers, generally speaking, have not been trained in how to write college essays, and that's not on them. It's just not part of the curriculum of an English teacher. And so oftentimes teachers will try to have students write them like AP Lang papers, research papers, or creative writing. They're not. So you might hear conflicting information. The other thing, what I really don't like about senior English classes are the peer reviews that are often told, where, everybody gets in the class gets to see everybody else's essays. This is a very competitive process. In most cases, your classmates are applying to the same schools as you are. And I don't know if you know this, but sometimes students cheat, and there is nothing to stop somebody from looking at another student's essay and going, "Wow, that's great. That's a good story they're telling. I think I'm going to use that." Um, and so personally, I would never show my true college essay to my peers. That's just me. If you need to have, I wouldn't talk about it with my friends who are applying to college again, because you're just going to get conflicting information. You kind of know your own North Star, what works for you to be authentic. If you need to show it to somebody, have it be somebody older than you or somebody younger than you, not somebody who's also applying to college. And also be very careful on social media. Some student was telling me that some TikTok video was saying to write an essay comparing yourself to an ice cream scoop or I don't know, something, like what flavor of ice cream you would be, some silliness like that. These essays are important. I've spent almost 2 hours at this point talking to you about how to write your college essay. That is not a way that I would waste. Social media, they're monetizing things. So if some student goes, "I'm 19 and this is the essay that I wrote to get into Stanford," I wouldn't follow what they have to say. There's really good resources out there. College Essay Guy is a great one. There's a lot of podcasts and things like that. So there's a great podcast called The College Admissions Process, where the host interviews admissions officers of all different colleges. I think there's almost 300 episodes now. Anyways, so if you want to apply to Duke, you want to apply to the University of Michigan, you want to apply to the University of Washington, UCLA, they interview them and they talk about all the things that they look at. And you can learn a lot of really good information from those people versus TikTok. So I want you to be creative, okay? I don't want students to think that I don't want you to be creative. I do. However, I'm going to stress this. This is not creative writing. And sometimes I've worked with students who have been waiting, they're very STEM focused, but they have a creative side and they can't wait to write their college essay because they are going to be so creative. But it doesn't work very well. Creative writing doesn't work well for college essays. So I'm going to read to you. I'm almost in reading aloud. So this was a student I worked with a number of years ago. This is one of the University of California prompts. It was, talk about a leadership experience that you had. These are the 350 word ones. This was the first draft. And the student, first of all, very good writer, but they loved creative writing. And we would constantly have arguments, and I'd say, "That's creative writing." And the student would say, "I don't understand. What do you mean?" And I define creative writing simply as, is that how you would say it? And if the answer is no, well, then it's creative writing because I want conversational storytelling, which is you write it like you say it. So this is the first draft. The story is very good. Okay, I don't want anybody to think I don't like the student story because I do. But when I read to you the final version of it, I think you will understand the difference in the readability and all that. So if you're wondering what the highlighted parts are, in my opinion, the yellow parts are pieces that I think are more creative writing oriented, and then the green I'll explain, excuse me, when I'm all done. I opened my jewelry box and found a slug. Adrenaline spiking, I shrieked at the unexpected sight. It seeped over my smooth silver rings, and heart pounding, I slammed the lid shut. That's how my sister envisioned the prank. In reality, I knew it was fake. I took one look at the dog hair covered, slug shaped piece of rubber and laughed. I could have left it on my dresser. I could have rolled my eyes. Instead, I hid it under her pillow. Struck with spontaneity, my commitment to our slug game began. It's an unspoken rule that defies time, arguments, and maturity. You look for the slug, but once he's found, you silently hide him somewhere new. My sister squishes the slug into my shoe. I perch him on her ceiling fan. I hide my smile when the slug falls out of my chemistry notebook. She carries him in her pocket for days without noticing. Every time I find the slug in my plant, volleyball bag, ski gloves, wherever his creative new home is, I'm proud. Although our rooms have always been a few physical feet apart, we weren't always as close. Nothing connected us, a teenager and a kid. Nothing until our slug hiding efforts. When we were younger, I hated how my sister copied all of my ideas. Now I'm glad I can be a role model she wants to follow. By contributing to silly traditions, she knows I'm there for the serious stuff too. We tell each other everything. I lead her away from challenges I faced and support her through overcoming her own. I owe our friendship and trust to a prank and a fake slug. He showed me simple actions leave a trail of positive influence. When I begin college, though, our rooms will be more than a few feet away. I could throw the cheap slug away when packing up my room. I could forget about it. It won't change my dedication to my first leadership role, big sister. But life's also much less monotonous when slugs make you smile, so of course I'll hide him under her pillow. So regarding the green, first of all, the student was making you statements, and as I said, do not make you statements. And then I'm there for the serious stuff too. We tell each other everything. And go, what's wrong with that, Mary Pat? It's fine. It's surface level again. It doesn't say anything. And then the conclusion is wrong. It doesn't really tie into college properly. So Here is the final version. And the student did end up changing the prompt to leadership to what's your uh, favorite skill or talent, something like that. My favorite skill is hiding a fake slug. That's not really a skill, but it represents more to me. A few years ago, my little sister's simple prank failed. She put a fake slug in my jewelry box, hoping to scare me. I took one look at the dog hair covered slug shaped piece of rubber and laughed. I could have left it on my dresser or rolled my eyes, but I hid it under her pillow instead, and our slug game began. Every time it's found, hiding in a shoe, volleyball bag, or ski gloves, we silently hide him somewhere new. We rarely speak about it, but it's become the tradition I'm most proud of. Although our bedrooms are only a few feet away, my sister and I weren't always close. Nothing connected us, a teenager and a kid. We made fun of each other. We never told each other things. But not long after our slug hiding began, she came to me for the first time. Hearing how she was scared to make friends in middle school, we suddenly felt like a team. Making fun of her wasn't an option anymore, and I wanted to help her navigate the same issues I'd faced. We're both part of the LGBT community, which our parents don't accept. Our silly tradition of hiding the slug has brought us closer, allowing me to support her through serious challenges. When we were little, I hated when she copied me. Now I feel lucky to be someone she wants to follow. While I know hiding a slug isn't a great skill, being a good older sister is. It also encourages me to be a role model she deserves. I know my sister and I will remain close while I'm in college. At the University of California, I look forward to helping others confront fears and overcome challenges. Same story, but this one goes a lot deeper. It's much easier to read because it's conversational. And so that's what I mean. Um, I I thought it might you might find it funny because I did. I just wanted to demonstrate again the difference between conversational writing and creative writing. So, as I said, conversational writing, it's written as if you were talking about it. So, this is the two examples. So, this is me. I love seeing water. It speaks to me. Now, if I'm doing it in the creative writing, and I will say I used ChatGPT to do this, which is why it made me laugh because I was like, I don't even know how to say it creatively. I'm drawn to water. Its presence stirs something deep within me as if it whispers secrets only my soul can hear. And I will tell you, as somebody who reads a lot of essays, I read statements like this. And again, I know this, you students are putting a lot of work into it, but that doesn't read very well if I'm reading quickly. And then also look at the difference in the number of words that creative writing takes up. And you have word counts. Okay, so conversational storytelling will be quicker to the point. Just about done here. Just reminding you about the importance of character and personal qualities. And then one of the things I would do, so again, I don't expect that you have everything done to this week, but once you have your college list, and then you know what application platforms and what the requirements are, so you'll know which colleges require essays and things like that. Then what I would do is organize, everything. Um, is it a self-reported transcript? Does my counselor send it in? Uh, do I self-report test scores if I'm sending them in, or do I have to have official scores? Are there letters of recommendation? How many? Have I asked for them? That type of stuff. And then when it comes to the essay piece, you know, assuming you're using the Common App, you're going to have a personal statement, but then go through and make a spreadsheet of all the different essays that you have to write, what the prompts, but organize them. So if you say, oh, because they're going to be, the wording might be different, but when you read through it, you might say, oh, okay, four of my schools have the why us essay and why this major. Okay. And the word count, it might be one has 250 words, one has 500 words, whatever. But okay, so I know I need one of those. Oh, okay. Three of my schools asked me to talk about a time when I disagreed with somebody and how I handled it. Like whatever it is, so that you have a sense of the stories that you're going to need to do. And then again, figuring out the deadlines and all that stuff. So, what makes a strong essay? This is from College Essay Guys, that he's a wonderful resource for essays. So, one, are you being authentic? Are you truly being yourself? Vulnerability. I keep talking about that. It's where you're sharing personal experiences. Insight. This means why are you telling this story? And sometimes I have to say to students, why are you telling the story? Like what? And it could be that there really is an important reason, but perhaps in the first draft or so that re reason isn't coming through. But what's the point? What's the purpose? What is it you want a college to know because of this essay? And then the craft. And that's why I was demonstrating earlier that do not think, especially at the beginning, that it's going to be a one draft and done. These have to show that you are a strong writer. It's got a clear structure. I can't tell you how many first drafts I get where it's one paragraph. You guys need to put paragraph breaks into this stuff. Anyways, you want to show that you have worked on this, that you are a strong writer. And then final checklist. Does the first paragraph set up the story? Remember, the reader knows nothing about you. Does the conclusion tie into college and beyond? Are you showing or are you just telling? Is it in your voice? Are you showing some vulnerability? What values are you demonstrating or showing to colleges? And is it a story that only you can tell? And then here's some tips, which some of them I've already said. Read it out loud to yourself. Don't worry about the hook. Check for spelling and grammar. Grammarly's good. Are you within the word count? If you're beyond the word count, it just will stop at that word count. So if you wrote 655 words, the last 5 words of your personal statement are not going to show up. Um, and a lot of times they'll show you what the minimum word count is. Again, it depends on the prompt. Are you showing and not just telling? Are you oversharing? Again, you don't want TMI. Check your adjectives and how many times you're using very. Be careful of exclamation points. I don't mind an occasional exclamation point, but lots of exclamation points, I don't know, it just kind of comes off. Um, do not say as a freshman in high school, sophomore in high school, junior in high school, senior in high school. You can just say ninth grade or freshman, 10th grade, sophomore, whatever. They know it's high school because you're applying to college. It's just extra words. Um, in the supplemental essays, did you answer the prompt? Check for dialogue, just paraphrase, no direct dialogue. And does your essay make sense? Is it readable? Because remember, they're reading it fast. And then just a simple overview about tense. I happen to be a fan of simple tense when writing college essays because I think simple tense tends to be more conversational as to how we talk. And I had a student reach out to me yesterday and they're like, oh, I'm kind of confused. Like, is it past it? So here's my rule of thumb. If it's in the past and no longer happening, like I'm not currently doing it anymore, it should be past tense. If I'm still doing it, if I did it in the past, but I'm still doing it now, it's present tense. And if it's something I plan to do in the future, it's future tense. So um, I'll use my dogs as an example. Past tense would be, I loved having a dog. Present tense is, I love having dogs. And then future tense would be, I can't wait to have a dog, or I look forward to having a dog, something like that. So, but simple tense tends to be the easiest to read. And then another brainstorming exercise. I hope that you will spend some time on this after we say goodbye in a minute. Although I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. I always have students think about, okay, we've just spent 2 hours really diving deep into the essays and character and personal qualities and all this stuff that colleges want to learn about students. So when you're before you write any essay, ask yourself, what are some things that you want a college to know about you, to understand about you when they are all done reading your application, which includes your essay. And students might say things like, wow, I want them to know that I don't give up, that I have a lot of determination. Okay, well, that's cool. That's not going to show up in a transcript. That's not going to show up as a test score. That's not going to show up as an activity. Possible, it might show up in a letter of rec, but we don't know. Or they might say, I like to dig so deep beyond the surface of things. Oh, that's cool. Well, again, where's that going to show up? And so the essay is a very sacred space, in my opinion. It's kind of a weird word to use, but to me, it is, and it's you don't want to waste it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say to you is think about what you want a college to know about you And then again, as I said, you get to control everything. So figure out how you're going to help them to know that through your essay. So as I said, what do you want a college to know about you? Um, I wish that I could, review every essay. Unfortunately I can't. I'm a volunteer here, but I do offer some opportunities. So Find Your Fit will offer, the dates haven't been scheduled yet, but I have another college counselor help me usually, and we will have signups for 15-minute sessions to review. Usually it's a personal statement that we're looking at. But I'm excited because we're very blessed in the school district. It started at Lake Washington High School. It spread to Wineta High School. I think it's at Redmond High School and also Tesla so far. But through the PTSAs, they have college essay workshops where parents are there on campus, usually once a week, starting toward end of September. And students can go and meet and have their essays reviewed. And I do train all the volunteers, so they're applying the same process that I taught you today. So please take advantage of that. That's a great opportunity. And then, as always, I am a resource in the community. You can email me at findyourfit@lwsf.org. This has been recorded. Yesterday's was recorded. Tuesday's was recorded. Tuesday's was already sent out because of my snafu that I did with the timing. But yesterday and today's will probably be sent out next week. The resources were already sent out. If for some reason you don't see them, check your spam or junk mail or email me and I will gladly send them to you.